Hello and welcome to Children's Time. It's good to be with you all again this week. We have been learning about Moses and about the Israelite people who had been slaves in Egypt. And today we're going to continue their story. When we left off last week, the Israelite people and the Egyptians were facing these plagues that were coming and being very scary to the people in Egypt. And every one of these plagues was designed to let Pharaoh know that he was supposed to let the Israelite people go, but he kept saying no, and so the plagues kept getting worse and worse. And finally, after the very last plague, Pharaoh says to Moses, "You know what? Your people can go. Take them and leave." And so Moses does. He leads the Israelite people out of Egypt, and they start walking. They start walking to this land that God has promised them that would be theirs. And so as they are marching out of Egypt, they come to a sea and they can't really get across it. And so they're all kind of waiting there to see what will happen next. And Pharaoh, in the meantime, changes his mind. He wants the Israelite people to come back. And so he sends all of his armies after the Israelite people. And Pharaoh has a lot of army. And so he sends them all, and the people of Israel see them coming, see the armies of Egypt coming for them, and they get really scared. And they don't know what to do. And they cry out to God and say, "Save us. Did you bring us out here to die? We're really afraid. We need your help." And they cry out to Moses, they cry out to God, and God answers them. God hears their cries of fear, and God says, "You know what? I am going to make a way for you to be able to cross this sea." And so he has Moses go up to the edge of the sea and lift up his staff, which is like a big long stick that Moses carries. And Moses lifts it up, and as Moses lifts up that staff, the waters of the sea spread apart. And so the people are actually able to walk across on dry land in between these walls of water of the sea that are being spread apart. And they do, they walk all the way across. And once they're across, Moses puts his staff down. And in the meantime, the Egyptian army has been following them, and they follow them even into the sea. And when Moses puts his staff down, the sea closes in on them, and they're actually trapped then in the water. And God does this in order to make sure that the Israelite people can go free, just like God said and God promised they would be able to go free. And so God then continues with the Israelite people as they continue to walk toward that land that God had promised. And after this happens, we hear that the Israelite people, they sing songs of praise to God because they're so happy, they're so relieved that they don't have to be afraid anymore, that they have been saved from the army and saved from the sea, and that everything is much better now. And so they're so excited that they sing these songs to God. And in fact, there's part of Exodus 15, chapter 20 and 21, talks about Miriam, who is Moses' sister. So then the prophet Miriam, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out dancing after her with tambourines and dancing. And Miriam sang to them, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea." And then, after they celebrate this victory, they wander off into the wilderness. And we'll hear about that story next week. But something I want you all to learn from this story is that there are times when we get really afraid in our lives. Our bigger dog, Ernie, he is always afraid when thunderstorms come. He doesn't like thunderstorms. He gets very nervous, and he sometimes walks around, and sometimes he gets really snuggly, and he just wants to be by us and close to us, and he needs to be petted and reassured that everything's going to be okay. But he gets really scared every time a thunderstorm comes. And so my husband Tim and I, we just make sure that we give him some nice pets and that we let him snuggle in by us, and then he feels better and he's able to make it through the thunderstorm. And afterward, he is again just fine. His fears have passed. And so that happens to us too as people, right? Sometimes we get really afraid. And sometimes when we're really scared, we don't know what to do. But one thing we can always do is tell God that we're afraid and ask God to help us and be near us. Ask God that we would feel God close by so that we can feel a little better. And we know that God is with us, right? That God will always be with us and will always be near us when we're afraid. And that's at least one person we can turn to and hopefully have some reassurance that things will be okay, that this fear will pass, and that things will be better on the other side. And so these stories that we learn about Moses can teach us a lot about God and about ourselves. And so I hope that you take that with you today, and that next time you're afraid, you turn to God and say, God, I'm really scared. Help me right now not to be so scared. Help me make it through this scary time in my life. And God will be with you. Be with me in prayer. Dear God, thank you that when we're afraid, we can turn to you. We can tell you that we're afraid and ask you for help. Thank you for always being with us and for always loving us. Amen. Well, thank you again for joining me this week on Children's Time, and I'll see you next week.